Hey everybody, it's Eric from GameShampoo.com. Here's my MacBook again, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the PlayStation 4, which Sony announced last week. Just kind of a recap for people who maybe missed out on the live press conference, or the live streaming was pretty terrible on some of the services that a lot of the major sites were using. So maybe if you just couldn't see the good stuff because the streaming was just kind of terrible, or otherwise if you missed out on some of the news or whatever, we're going to be kind of collecting all the official news in this video, talking about it a little bit, and talking about some next generation video games, stuff like Knack, the next infamous, next Killzone, next project from the MotorStorm developers, a new Battlefield game, and all that good stuff. So kind of just a summary of what we know about the next gen in terms of PlayStation so far. So I guess number one being, hey, the PlayStation 4, that exists. Sony announced the PlayStation 4 as they were pretty much expected to at their little New York shindig on, I guess last Tuesday. It's about 5 days ago now. And a lot of the rumors that people had been circulating about that thing turned out to be true. They didn't show off any external box, so nobody knows what the console itself is going to look like, but they did show off the controller, and it did turn out to be the same controller that was leaked a few days prior to the conference. The one with the little touchscreen in the middle, kind of the same material as the back of the Vita, and then there's like this little oval button next to it. It's called the share button. You can essentially click that button at any time while you're playing a game, and you'll stream live video of what's going on your screen to the internet so other people can watch if you are so inclined to let that happen. They can jump in, watch what you're doing, offer advice, or in some games they can even offer help. They were pretty vague with what form exactly that would take, but maybe I think they mentioned giving you a health potion if you're about to die, or otherwise kind of influencing the world in really small ways, sort of like some of the stuff that Nintendo's done with Super Mario Galaxy and some of their other games, where a second player can kind of jump in and say, like, go here, or grab like a coin for you or something like that. It seems pretty minor, generally speaking. It did detail the internal architecture of the system and some of the mechanical components that are going into that thing, and the primary purpose of that whole conversation seemed to be like, hey, we know the PS3 was really hard to develop for, but trust me, the PS4 is going to be way easier. They went on, they had all this talk before the PS3 came out, about how it's, basically a PC in your living room, and how you don't need a PC anymore, you have a PS3, which obviously was not even close to true. But the makeup of that system, the architecture inside of the PS3, was nothing like that of a PC with all these, cell processors in it and stuff like that. The PS4 is supposed to be much easier to handle. It contains supercharged PC architecture, an x86 CPU, an enhanced PC GPU, 8 GB of high-speed DDR5 memory, and a local hard drive, which the size of which has not yet been specified. But the bigger the better. I think with the current SKUs of the PS3 that are on the market, I think it's fair to expect at least 250 to 300, and maybe like a 500 GB or more SKU. Because I think the current PS3s are like 300 and 500, and compared to the like 20 and 60 and 80 or whatever it was when the PS3 first launched, it's really clear how important digital downloads and all that stuff have become over this last generation. So hopefully they're kind of planning ahead and saying, like, it's clearly going to become even more important over the next 5 to 10 years. Hopefully they're really planning that out. I'm for at least 500 gigabytes. And 2. Okay. Sneeze averted, I think. So that's the internal architecture of the system. That's the controller. And after they talked about that stuff, they showed off their first PlayStation 4 exclusive, which is an action platformer. Almost kind of seemed like in the vein of something like the first Jak and Daxter, or Daxter for the PSP. Kind of reminded me of that a little bit. I didn't see much in the way of like gunplay, like the later Jak games or Ratchet and Clank. It seemed like more of a melee-focused kind of action platformer. It's basically a game where you play as Knack, who is kind of this lab experiment creature who comes to life to help humans fight in this war against goblins. And the goblins are invading the human world. They've got tanks and mechs and all this crazy stuff, and you're created to join this army, help these guys duke it out against the goblins. And it seems from the trailer like you can kind of alter your shape, I'm guessing in real time. So basically it's Alter Echo 2, exclusively for the PS4. No, but that's almost kind of the vibe I got from it. Where you can kind of change shape depending on the situation that you're presented with, and fight some goblins. And it seems like you might be fighting some humans too. Characters kind of seem to have ulterior motives in the trailer they showed off. And I guess the thing that was that most jumped out at me about that game was the visual presentation, because we've had games like Ratchet and Clank Future on the PS3 come really close to nailing that kind of Pixar, DreamWorks, CG movie kind of vibe. Cutscenes in those games maybe were almost on par with some of the animated movie stuff that was going on back at the time, back in 2007. But this game, it really looked like something that you could expect to see in like a DreamWorks film. The style was very similar, the art style, the artwork. The characters were pretty emotive. It looked, assuming that it's fairly early on still, and targeting maybe launch window for PS4 or a little bit after, it looked pretty impressive. So that was their first exclusive, and then they moved on to talking more about what the PS4 does and why it's different from the PS3. And as it turns out, that's a lot of stuff. It's really, we were hearing a lot of things about how the PS4 would be a more integrated system than the PS3, and then, Xbox and all that stuff that we have today, before the system was officially launched. And that is definitely the case. I didn't really expect to care about any of that stuff. I don't, because when I hear more integrated socially for a console, I think like Uncharted 3, to like tell everybody you just unlocked an achievement on Facebook and make your friends hate you. But that's not what we're talking about here. Actually, what we're talking about here is that share button and the ability to take video of any game you're playing, stream that live. You can even, kind of build a community around the videos that you stream. And in a way, it almost kind of eliminates the need for those like Let's Play kind of videos that you've been undoubtedly seeing a ton of on YouTube lately, because you don't really need to go to YouTube anymore to see straight gameplay footage of a game to decide if you're going to like to play it, or just, if you're bored and you want to watch somebody play a game or whatever. You can just turn on your PS4 and do that. And that's pretty neat. And there's like a system of tools in place for every game to kind of allow you to go back and edit together like a sizzle reel, or focus on certain parts of gameplay. You can go back and rewind to earlier gameplay, record that, and then upload that. So there is kind of this kind of customization aspect to it that lets you get a little more in depth, kind of think like Black Ops or Halo, video creation tools. That's kind of the vibe I was getting from it. And then they dropped this little tidbit of information, which I found to be possibly the most interesting part of the entire conference. And I haven't heard a ton about it since then, but Sony, in their own words, the PlayStation 4 will get to know players based on their preferences and the games and the videos that they play on the console, and then as the system gets to know them, it will develop a personality profile of the players, and it can use that profile to automatically predict which games you're going to like, download, I'm assuming demos, or, you know, like just little tiny chunks of the game to your console while it's in sleep mode, and so that way the next time you come and turn on your console, which is supposed to be a much more simple process, they said you just hit the start button, I think, and then it just kind of boots to where you were before. So the moment you come up and you load your console back up, you have that stuff downloaded. You didn't even tell your PS4 to go and download that stuff for you. It just knew, like, hey, you might like this game, so now you have it. And if you play it for a little while and you like it, then, you know, you can pay for it and have the rest of the game. I assume that's how it works. You know, they didn't go into a ton of detail about it. They said, you know, it can predict which games you're going to like and then download them and then you'll have them. But I assume it's not going to, like, charge your credit card for anything without your knowledge, because that would be crazy. And they also announced that if you like a game and you're downloading it, you can actually play the game while it's downloading. It'll download all the integral gameplay kind of data first, and then, you know, just enough that you can play the first parts of the game, and then while you're playing through that first chunk of the game, the rest of it will download in the background, which is super cool. It eliminates, you know, probably all the downtime on a good enough internet connection when you're downloading a game. So you can kind of just jump into it right away, and that actually makes the prospect of downloading games to the PlayStation 4 kind of more exciting than downloading games through Steam for me, just because, you know, when I queue up a game in Steam, there's like a 30-40 minute wait, but that's apparently not going to be here on the PS4. And then they detailed some stuff for the Vita and how they want to bring gaming both, you know, to the living room and outside of the living room with tablets, Vita, that kind of stuff, phones, like the Xperia Play. And they talked about how you can use the Vita for remote play with the PlayStation 4, and since then they've come out and said that they're going to ask everybody who develops for the PlayStation 4 to also develop in a way for the Vita and implement unique touch controls and that kind of thing for when people are playing the game on the Vita, which is cool and kind of makes sense because there are 4 less buttons on the Vita than there are on the PS4 controller. You can't click in the sticks, and there are only 2 triggers on the Vita, so there has to be some way in there just to do basic functionality in the game, like, you know, I guess it's going to be like tap the back touch panel to sprint, or, you know, hit the touch screen to throw a grenade or something like that. And I always find those controls to be kind of annoying, so I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out for the PS4 and some of those larger games. But the idea in whole is really cool. It's kind of the same thing that pushed the Wii U and kind of made me really have a lot of fun with that over the last holiday season, is that idea that somebody can be there using the TV watching Netflix or whatever, and you can be on the PS4 still, and you can, you know, be on the couch or come upstairs or do whatever and kind of have your Vita in your hands, and that's, you know, and you're still playing the same game. It's still streaming the same visual fidelity of that PS4 game to your hand and stuff like that. It's pretty neat if they manage to pull it off. So then they announced 3 exclusives, kind of rapid fire, right in a row after they showed off the Vita stuff. The first was Killzone Shadowfall. They showed off a pretty lengthy gameplay demo of that, which, you know, there are videos of that out there. I've So if you want to see the full gameplay demo, it pretty much looks like Killzone, which is to say that it's really pretty. It's actually a lot more colorful than any of the other Killzone titles. There's a lot of green, there's a lot of blue, there's a lot of orange in this demo. You know, a lot of that stuff kind of fades out once the game sort of kicks into action and everything starts exploding and whatever. But in the beginning, you know, you're in this really futuristic kind of chrome-plated city, giant skyscrapers everywhere, a lot of blue hues, a lot of silver hues. There's, you know, vegetation, plant life growing all around in this kind of city metropolis, which is something that you haven't really seen in any other Killzone game before, because everything's kind of just been messed up in every other Killzone game. And this is kind of the story of, I guess, how that stuff kind of became all messed up. So then there's like a Hellgas terrorist attack, and that kind of launches everything into the standard Killzone gameplay. You're running up behind cover, taking cover behind chest-high pillars and, you know, other crap that's falling over. Peek around it, you've got you know, assault rifle, and I think they had a light machine gun in the demo, and a pistol that they were showing off. Pretty standard stuff. But the weapons were kind of neat, actually. Functionally, they're totally standard, but you know, visually and kind of you know, with the sounds that they would make and stuff, they seemed a little more futuristic maybe than a few of the guns that we've seen in Killzone before, which is cool, because to me the best parts of the Killzone games were always those weapons that they would give you, kind of those kind of like candy weapons that they'd give you as a reward for doing something really hard, where now you've got like a chain lightning gun or a gun that shoots like rivets out of it that you can make explode. Like, that was always the coolest stuff about those games. So if you got to use those weapons a little more, or maybe if there were more of those weapons, that would be neat. Yeah, I mean, other than that, it was pretty standard Killzone. It looked maybe a little bit more scripted, or a little, maybe not more scripted than Killzone 3 was. That was still like a pretty linear, like, you know, action movie style of game. But maybe like they had just received a bit of a higher budget, and they had kind of raised the ceiling of their ambitions for some of the cutscene stuff a little bit, kind of made it a little bit more of like a summer blockbuster kind of vibe, is really what I started getting from it towards the end. There was this helicopter that flew by, and your character kind of runs at it and jumps, and there's a rope dangling from it. He grabs the rope, and so now he's flying around this city on the bottom of this helicopter, and there are guys in the helicopter who come out and start shooting at him. So you take out your pistol, you shoot the guys out of the helicopter, and Stream started kind of freaking out a little bit, but it looked like he planted some C4 on it and blew the helicopter up and jumped off onto this building below him. It was all really fluid, it all looked really nice, it was all running at a great frame rate, and supposedly that was shared with Sony by somebody hitting the share button, although there were some kind of HUD differences in that version compared to the live version of the game, so I'm not sure if that was kind of like smoke and mirrors stuff, or if they actually did that. But either way, you know, that game looks totally fine. Another first-person shooter isn't something that I'm totally psyched about, unless it's doing something really crazy and different, like Bioshock Infinite kind of seems like it is. And I guess, like, we'll find out in about a month if it does. But, you know, it's kind of like a staple genre. It's something that you pretty much have to have at launch, and it's definitely something that I look forward to playing at launch, even though, you know, the most interesting thing to me was actually Driveclub. That's the new game from Evolution Studios. It's a racing game. These are the MotorStorm guys, Evolution Studios, in case you haven't kept, you know, a super close eye on Sony exclusives. The MotorStorm games are always kind of a low-key exclusive for the PS3 when that stuff was rolling out. You know, and it kind of, I kind of think that's a shame. I actually really liked all three of those games. And there were, you know, there were two portable spin-offs, one for the PSP that I never played, and like a kind of RC cars kind of weird version for the Vita that I played and totally hated. But those core MotorStorm games, I actually thought they were a lot of fun, and so I'm really looking forward to what's coming next from those guys. And the thing that makes Driveclub kind of interesting is that it marks as a sort of huge departure from that destruction derby, go out into the wilderness and smash everything up with your giant car or motorcycle kind of vibe that you get from a MotorStorm game. Instead, Driveclub is, it seemed almost comparable to something like Test Drive, where it is a bit more realistic in that you're driving real world cars. These are real brands. They are meticulously detailed. I mean, they got into a car, looked at the interior a little bit. They looked under the hood. This stuff, from what I've seen of it so far, it's just totally stunning. The most realistic depiction of a car I've probably ever seen, and that in itself was really exciting. But they're doing a lot of social stuff, kind of following along with that vibe, that general kind of theme that the PS4 itself is going for, of just, expanding the realm of social stuff to this whole other level. And that's really cool. So the name of the game is Driveclub, and it kind of comes from this mentality of you're going into the game and you're forming a club, and from that club you can create your own racing challenges, you can create your own races, tournaments, stuff like that, and all that stuff is accessible to anyone via the PS4's online connection. So players will get into the game, they'll join a club, they race against other clubs all around the world, and you complete these challenges that other people set for you in the framework of their own game. So this stuff can range from a quick time trial to a tournament that lasts for a week or more and encompasses thousands of different challengers. And doing well in these challenges will earn points towards your club. So it's kind of seems like it's going to be rooted really heavily in online multiplayer. I don't know if there even is a single player option, but it sounds like one of the most exciting multiplayer racing games that I've ever heard of. If they do it well, obviously. There was kind of a bit of split between fans of the MotorStorm games and how those games handled, just because the cars could be very sluggish. So I'm interested to see how they adapt their handling model to a more realistic style of driving, and I'm interested to see if those online frameworks that they're setting up can really handle how ambitious some of the stuff they're doing with the connectivity and the community stuff, how ambitious that stuff is going to be. But it sounds really promising, and I'm not even a huge fan of driving games. I like them, but this is probably the game I'm most excited for so far on the PS4, and it kind of almost seems like a natural evolution of what Criterion did with Burnout Paradise and the Need for Speed games lately, where they're making them much more social. Next game up was Infamous Second Son. So it's another Infamous game, but it doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be a continuation of Infamous 2, at least not directly. There was an ending to Infamous 2 where kind of everybody in the world got superpowers and stuff got pretty messed up. So I'm not sure if this game is a continuation off of that ending or if it's an entirely new story with an entirely new character. I feel like they could branch it out from the ending of Infamous 2 really well, because it takes place in this world where government security has really just gone crazy, and there's security cameras everywhere, there are security checkpoints everywhere, kind of a police state mentality, I suppose. And then you come in here as this guy with superpowers. You know, when people publicly unveil that they have superpowers, the police state mentality only gets worse because people obviously are paranoid about these, you know, gifted individuals running around with shooting fireballs and whatever. And so you, as the player, kind of seem like you're going to be taking on this sort of rebel role, going in and messing up the government checkpoints and kind of being like a freedom fighter almost. And the really brief gameplay video they showed off, which actually did contain some gameplay they confirmed yesterday, that kind of gave me a DMC Devil May Cry vibe. The most recent one that came out, not, you know, the first four. Kind of that rebellious punk sort of attitude that Dante had in that game, kind of seemed like it translates over to this a little bit. And then they showed off Jonathan Blow's next game, The Witness, which will debut on the PS4 alongside the PC version of the game, which was a nice surprise and kind of a nice counter to, you know, all the explosions and stuff that happened before. It's just going to be like, it looks like a pretty laid-back puzzle game where, according to Jonathan Blow anyway, he wants that aha moment where you're figuring out a puzzle and you kind of have that epiphany of how to solve it. He wants that to be kind of present in every facet of the game, which sounds interesting. Jonathan Blow, for those who haven't heard of him, is the guy who made Braid for Xbox Live Arcade, and I think it later came to PlayStation Network and Steam as well. It's definitely on Steam, but yeah, that game is interesting. It'll be interesting to see what comes next from him. Capcom announced a new game that they're calling Deep Down for the PlayStation 4. We have the first screens of that game on our site, and they look really impressive. Deep Down really reminded me of Dragon's Dogma in a lot of ways. It looks like you're kind of making this soldier and then going into all these underground dungeons, fighting dragons and ogres and stuff like that. Action RPG. Not much else about it is really known. It looks really nice, so, you know, there's that. Deep Down is just a tentative title, so it could theoretically be a Dragon's Dogma 2 or something like that. But it looks like it could be kind of neat. And then Square Enix took the stage to show off that tech demo, which they had shown before, but then they announced an announcement that will be coming at E3. So there's some sort of Final Fantasy news coming at E3, and obviously we'll be there, and whatever that news ends up being, we'll have it for you when Square Enix actually announces it. And then Blizzard came up on the stage, and they kind of closed things out a little bit by announcing that they would be bringing Diablo 3 to both the PS3 and the PS4. So current and next gen tech will both get Diablo 3, which is cool, you know, like, I like Diablo 3, but I played that game almost a year ago, so I don't know that I particularly care about playing it again. As for other PS4 news, we do have a few other pieces of news that launched on the site after the conference ended. So Sony is requiring developers to make games playable on the Vita. We already kind of touched on that earlier. But again, you know, they require people to make the game functional on both consoles, which is neat. PlayStation 4 pre-orders have already begun in Europe. So if you live in Europe, you can, I believe it's at Game. Yeah, you can go to Game, drop 20, and you'll have a reservation, even though they haven't announced the price just yet. That's enough to get you a reservation for the console. And I have a little bit of Battlefield 4 talk coming out of both EA and GameStop. EA showed Battlefield 4 to GameStop's CEO, and he tweeted about it the other day. He said, "I got to see Battlefield 4 today, and all I can say is wow. Thanks EA for the sneak peek. Can't wait for you all to see it. CEO, hashtag BF4. So, next Battlefield is coming. Its next gen has been confirmed by both GameStop and later EA, who calls the game nothing short of astonishing. Well, specifically they say console partners who have seen our early work agree EA's next-gen software is nothing short of astonishing. So, yeah, Battlefield 4, next-gen. It's astonishing, according to the people who are developing it. Which is pretty exciting. I know a lot of people would be excited for a fourth Battlefield game. So, that's basically everything that Sony talked about. And pretty much everything that's happened kind of in the fallout couple of days since the system was announced. So now you're all caught up. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. See you next time.